two kinds of line, broken and unbroken, open and closed. With only that difference, the I Ching arranges 64 hexagrams, figures that have carried divinatory, philosophical, and cosmological meaning across centuries. In early 18th century Europe, these diagrams reached a thinker already fascinated by another way of using two signs, 0 and 1. The encounter was real. The legend built around it is more complicated. It is often told as a sudden revelation. A European mathematician opens a Chinese book and finds the code of the future. The real story is less simple and more revealing. It concerns letters, translations, theological hopes, partial knowledge, and the human temptation to treat a resemblance as if it were an origin. The Jesuit Joachim Bouvet, writing from China, sent Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz materials connected with the I Ching. Leibniz saw something that startled him. The broken and unbroken lines could be arranged in patterns that resembled binary combinations. He did not discover binary arithmetic in that moment. He had been working on it for decades, but he recognized a striking symbolic correspondence, and he treated that correspondence as evidence that ideas could travel farther than the boundaries people imagined between civilizations. Leibniz's binary arithmetic was a mathematical system for representing numbers with two digits, 0 and 1. He explored it alongside other ambitions, a calculating machine, a universal symbolic language he called the Characteristica Universalis, and a vision of reasoning made more explicit and reliable. These projects belonged together in his imagination, but they were not one completed machine, and they were not a blueprint for the digital age. They were 17th century attempts to make calculation, language, and knowledge more intelligible. For Leibniz, 0 and 1 also carried theological weight. He sometimes imagined 1 as divine unity and 0 as nothingness, creation emerging from the relation between something and nothing. This was not mathematics proving theology. It was Leibniz using mathematics inside a larger philosophical and religious vision. The distinction matters. A symbol can be powerful without becoming a proof of everything we wish it to mean. The I Ching deserves the same care. It is not an ancient computer waiting to be discovered. Its hexagrams belong to a long tradition of divination, commentary, ethics, cosmology, and reflection on change. Broken and unbroken lines can be mapped onto two-state patterns. That is what fascinated Leibniz. But mapping is not identity. The I Ching does not teach binary arithmetic in Leibniz's sense, and Leibniz's arithmetic does not contain the whole world of the I Ching. The encounter is valuable precisely because the traditions are different. It asks us to practice a harder form of comparison, neither denying a formal resemblance nor using that resemblance to take possession of another tradition. A diagram can travel across languages. Its meaning does not travel unchanged. This is the first lesson of the binary mirror. Resemblance can connect distant worlds, but it can also tempt us to erase their differences. We can admire the formal echo between a broken line and a 0 without turning Chinese thought into a prehistory of Western computing. We can value Leibniz's arithmetic without claiming that it explains every later technology. Historical care does not weaken wonder. It gives wonder an object worthy of respect. A second image now enters the story, the Great Wall. But even this name can mislead. What we call the Great Wall was never one simple object built once for one purpose. Across centuries, different states and dynasties razed, repaired, abandoned, and rebuilt frontier works. The best-known stretches are largely Ming, but the frontier was more than masonry. It was a changing system of passes, forts, signal towers, soldiers, roads, supplies, taxes, trade rules, and local communities. Some frontier works were rammed earth, others used brick or stone. Some guarded mountain passes, others linked garrisons across long distances. No single wall stretched across history with a single meaning. The frontier was a landscape of administration as much as architecture.
A wall can slow movement, channel it, tax it, observe it, and sometimes stop it. It can also create meeting points. Passes became sites of commerce as well as defense. Frontier policy involved diplomacy as well as force, and trade concessions as well as exclusion. The historical question is not whether a wall worked in the abstract. The question is, for whom, under what political conditions, and with what costs?
The wall did not decide history by itself. Mongol conquest in the 13th century involved campaigns, sieges, captured positions, alliances, and political fragmentation. In 1644, Manchu forces entered through Shanhai Pass after the Ming state had been shaken by rebellion and crisis. The general Wu Sangui opened the pass in a decisive political moment. These events do not prove that walls are useless. They show that infrastructure operates inside larger worlds of strategy, legitimacy, logistics, and choice.
It is tempting to call the Great Wall a physical version of what Martin Heidegger named Gestell, or enframing. But that would be inaccurate. Heidegger was not describing a fortress. He was describing a technological way of seeing, in which people and things appear primarily as resources to measure, organize, and use. The wall can still serve as a visual metaphor for boundary making, but it is not Heidegger's example, and it is not his concept made of stone.
The metaphor becomes useful only when we keep its limits visible. Modern states and institutions build boundaries in networks as well as in landscapes. China's so-called Great Firewall is not a continuation of the ancient wall. It is a modern nickname for systems of internet control, filtering, blocking, and technical interference with network traffic. Research has documented methods such as forged DNS responses and other forms of censorship. The materials are different. The political and technical conditions are different. The question of controlled passage, however, returns in a new medium. A network boundary may inspect a request, interrupt a connection, alter a response, or make a destination difficult to reach. These are technical actions, but their significance depends on law, institutions, public life, and the people affected by them.
Elsewhere, information can narrow for different reasons. Ranking systems may prioritize some material over other material. Social networks can reward familiar voices. People often choose sources that confirm what they already believe. These processes may reinforce selective exposure, but they are not identical to state censorship, and they do not create the same effects for everyone. The evidence on filter bubbles and echo chambers is mixed. The real task is not to repeat a fashionable metaphor. It is to ask how technical design, institutional power, and human habit combine to shape what becomes visible.
Here, the two stories meet without becoming one story. Leibniz saw a bridge in the hexagrams, a formal resonance across distance. The frontier system reminds us that movement is always organized, sometimes protected, sometimes restricted, sometimes negotiated. Digital systems carry both possibilities. They can widen access, preserve knowledge, and connect strangers. They can also rank, exclude, monitor, and make the world appear only in forms a system can count. The deepest question is not whether the world is binary. Human life is not exhausted by open and closed, 0 and 1, inside and outside. The deeper question is how we use distinctions. Every language, map, database, and institution needs some distinctions in order to act. The danger begins when a useful distinction is mistaken for the whole of reality, or when a category made for one purpose is allowed to govern every purpose. Do our systems help us interpret complexity, or do they pretend to erase it? Do they make room for translation, judgment, and revision? Or do they harden temporary categories into permanent walls?
Leibniz's encounter with the I Ching was not the birth of the computer. It was something more human.
an encounter with a pattern that seemed to speak across distance. The Great Wall was not merely a monument to fear. It was a frontier system whose meaning changed with the people, institutions, and conflicts around it. And our digital boundaries are not destiny. They are designs, made, maintained, contested, and revised by human beings. Whenever a system decides what may pass, what may be counted, and what may be seen, the responsibility to interpret it belongs to us.